Hello, my name is Olielina Napol. So today I'm gonna talk about four failure factors of federalism in Malaysia. First of all, the colonial system put in place during British administration, which was based on negotiating treaties with Malay Sultanate nations. Federation of Malaysia was created in 1963 when Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore joined the federation. Singapore then was removed from the federation in 1965 as a result of disagreements between the federal government and the state of Singapore officials. Malaysia, a federation made up of the 11 states of Malaya, the Borneo state of Sabah and Sarawak, and three federal territories, is categorized as a representative democracy and operates as a constitutional monarchy. Next, Malaysia is the only federal country in Southeast Asia which is the federal constitutional elective monarchy, where the head of state is Yang di-Pertuan Agong, while head of government is Prime Minister. The state governments are led by the chief ministers. Malaysia has a bicameral parliament consisting of the House of Representatives, lower house, which has 322 members, and the Senate, which is the upper house. The Senate is made up of 70 senators, of which 26 selected by the 13 member states, and other 44 are elected by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong with the assistance and advice of the Prime Minister.
Firstly, did not distribute the budget fairly. Sultan Ibrahim Iskandar, who is the Johor ruler, voiced his frustration over the federal government's pledges that were not kept and the distribution of federal monies, claiming that the sovereign state was treated like a stepchild. The federal government was promised to broaden the Senai-Desaru Expressway and North-South Expressway, but it was not being fulfilled. Besides that, Sultan Iskandar said that despite generating over 13 billion ringgit per year annually for government income, Johor distribution of federal money is glaringly unequal. Johor was the fourth largest gross domestic product (GDP) contributor for behind Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, and Sarawak as of 2020. Expenditure 2022 allocated 4.6 billion ringgit Malaysia for Johor's development, or 6% of the total development budget, while Johor contributed 9.5% of Malaysia's GDP in 2020. Allocate the budget with a fairly significant gap by race. The Indian and Chinese communities received less than 3% of the allocation set aside for the Bumiputera and Orang Asli communities under budget 2022. The Bumiputera community received 11.4 billion ringgit Malaysia. The Orang Asli community received 274 million ringgit Malaysia, and the Chinese and Indian communities received 345 million ringgit Malaysia in budget 2022. Lim Kok Ann said the Chinese and Indian communities received 345 million ringgit Malaysia, which is less than 3% of the 11,674 million ringgit Malaysia received by the Bumiputera. If we add the 274 million ringgit Malaysia received to the Orang Asli community in the Bumiputera column. The former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad's economic advisor, Muhammad Abdul Khalid, questioned lack of fairness in budget 2022 after referring to the disparity in allocation between Bumiputera and non-Bumiputera communities. Lastly, the budget for East Malaysia lower than West Malaysia. If we take the budget 2022 as an example, where Peninsular Malaysia still allocated the most development allocation at 322.3 billion ringgit Malaysia, while Sabah and Sarawak received only 3% of the total development budget. Sarawak got 4.6 billion ringgit Malaysia, which is 1.4% of the total development allocation. In contrast, Sabah collected 5.2 billion ringgit Malaysia, which is 1.6% of the total development allocation. The federal government still centers on and prioritizes the interests of Peninsular Malaysia. If the financial allocation and development were given fairly, it will gradually enhance the relationship between Peninsula and East Malaysia. The current administration could consider allocating state development grant based on each Malaysian state's total land area, bridging the development gap between Peninsula and East Malaysia effectively. So, Malaysia could benefit from increased revenue from Sabah and Sarawak.
Greetings to Madam. My name is Shona, and today I'm going to talk about the conflicts of authority between states and central government. Federalism implies that a state is managed by two bodies of government. It is clear that there would be power struggle between the central and local governments. Both governments would undoubtedly like to assert their power over the other, which could lead to the conflict in the future, potentially impeding the development of a specific area. Kelantan government has been demanding oil royalty from Putrajaya for decades. The central government dismissed the state's demand, stating that the ground of the extracted oil is outside of Kelantan's territorial water. Therefore, the Kelantan government filed suit against Petroleum Nasional Berhad, Petronas. However, the Kelantan oil royalty suit with the federal government settled in the year of 2019 after the withdrawal of royalty suits by the Kelantan government. Second is the Malaysia Agreement MA63. Sarawak has been battling for its numerous rights that has been eroded over the years, waiting for them to be restored and given back. The reason why Sabah and Sarawak fights for its right is because of the undeveloped states. Sabah and Sarawak land are bigger than the peninsula. However, the populations of the two states combined are thinly populated. Firstly, the oil and gas resources. The Malaysia Parliament passed the Petroleum Development Act PDA 1974 in 1974, granting the federal government ownership of all gas and oil deposits discovered in any part of the country. States with oil and gas, such as Sabah and Sarawak, were given a pitiful amount of 5% royalty. Second is the unrecognized status as one of the Malaysia founder. In 1976, there were amendments in the federal constitutions that stated that Sabah and Sarawak were simply listed as two of the 13 states in Malaysia. The positions of Sabah and Sarawak should be on par with the peninsula and not equal to the states in peninsula. As a result of Sarawak being recognized as merely a state, Sarawak received insufficient allocations of the national budget, thus leads to limitations for state development. As the peninsula is developing, Sabah and Sarawak would still have to face with difficulty to access necessities such as water, electricity, healthcare, and a proper road.
Factor 3. Overlaps of separation of power in Malaysia. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong and the two Majlis shall make up Malaysia Parliament. Therefore, there is a personal overlap with the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, although the Yang di-Pertuan Agong is a member of Parliament. This is only a formality and he does not actually have a significant role in it. The Prime Minister and the Minister are also representative of the Dewan Rakyat and the Dewan Negara respectively. The separation of power between these two bodies should be maintained even if the Minister is a member of Parliament. For example, in the recent 15th general election in November 2022, Yang di-Pertuan Agong Sultan Abdullah Rayatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah has been thrust into a middle of the political crisis in which His Majesty will determine a new Prime Minister for the third time in 3 years, thereby expanding His Majesty's role as a political arbiter. Sultan Abdullah publicly requested Anwar and Muhyiddin to form a unity government at a meeting at the palace on Tuesday. Muhyiddin publicly rejected, telling reporters that his coalition that have a majority in its own right, while Anwar said he would digest His Majesty's advice and strive to gather further support. The disadvantages having a minister who is a member of parliament because they are the one who draft legislation and create policies. When a bill is going through the legislative process, members of parliament will tend to support the minister's proposal, since they are from the same political party because of the electoral system simple majority making the ruling party effectively controls parliament. In some cases, the parliament will transfer authority to a member of the executive. The parliament is the only body can create the legislation and it is a breach of separation of power when the authority of making law is transferred to a member of executive. Furthermore, the legislature is seen as exercising the executive role through a legislative processes such as debates, question times, and select committees. The legislature seems like taking the role of the judiciary when there are some circumstances of breach parliamentary privilege or contempt of parliament by regulating its own composition and procedure. Judges cannot make law, but they do make law through the doctrine of judicial precedence. For example, Gopal Sriram stated that the Chief Justice and the extension of the Superior Court Justice were the protector of the federal constitution, the supreme law of the nation. He said that the Superior Court judge served as a check and balance of the legislature and the executive branch of government, noting that the Chief Justice was the lead of the judiciary. He stated that any effort to allow Parliament to nominate the Chief Justice or to place the office under Parliament would be violate the separation of power theory. Sriram, a former federal court judge, said this in reaction to the release of Gerakan Tanah Air GTA general election program, which includes a vow to bring 9 important senior government personnel under Parliament's oversight if it wins at the polls.
Besides that, the other main failure factor of Malaysian federalism is political instability throughout Malaysian general election. In Malaysian concept of politics, the party that have won fewer seats will form the opposition in parliament, who's meant to watching over the ruling government to prevent them become authoritarian and restrict its power. The other function includes the duty to question the government's policy as well representing the people's need. But in Malaysia history, for example, after the 14th general election, the Pakatan Harapan won the historic 2018 election, and the coalition chairman is Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad as the 7th Prime Minister of Malaysia from 10 May 2018. But his government fell in 22 months due to internal disagreement resulting in UMNO's return to power in 2022 as part of another alliance. According to economy and corruption-related issues, Malaysians have been frustrated with the political instability that has gripped the country. Therefore, we have seen 3 prime ministers over the past 2 years in our country. On the contrary, Tan Sri Dato Muhyiddin Yassin as the 8th Prime Minister consequently quickly moved rehabilitated disgraced member of Barisan Nasional because his administration quashed corruption charge against the stepson of former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who himself was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Last year on charges that include abuse of power and money laundering, even before shutting down parliament in January. Thus, Dato Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob as the 9th Prime Minister as the caretaker government to administer during the August 2021 until November 2022, but he had to dissolve parliament in October for only 10 months because he expected decline in the world economy and the seats of division in the cabinet. Also, done at the insistence of his party UMNO or to save the court cluster are the main reasons, as well as insisted that the resolution was aimed to preventing disharmony in the government's administration. This premier said that the snap polls could help end the political instability. In general election, 15 results are vital for the country because it brings more uncertainty to financial markets. This is largely because the governing coalition, PH and BN for GE15, did not predict crushing complete loss on the surface. Interestingly, nor did the main opposition coalition, Pakatan Harapan, expect and absolutely win in this election. The election result caused a political realignment by ending the country's first ever hung parliament and anti-hopping law in Malaysia by the two political parties between Perikatan Nasional (PN) and Pakatan Harapan (PH). It has also put an end to the sole fact that no single coalition winning an outright simple majority of 112 seats in 222 seats in parliament with different coalitions. Then, Pakatan Harapan, Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional as well as the counterparts from East Malaysia, Gabungan Parti Sarawak (GPS) and Gabungan Rakyat Sabah (GRS) have to engage in a merry-go-round of negotiations to achieve the obligatory collective number of parliamentary seats to majority government. In other words, the government of Malaysia should very concerned about the pressures faced by the people in middle-income urban areas apart from abuse of power and concern to achieve the political stability, whereas it must start from a ruling party and how it can strengthen the federalism, especially to stabilize the life of people.
In conclusion, imbalanced distribution of funds between the two regions, conflicts of authority between the state and central government, overlaps in separation of power in Malaysia, and political instability throughout Malaysian general election are factors in the failure of Malaysian federalism. After 59 years from the formation of Malaysia, which took place on 16 September 1963, we can't deny that problems will inevitably arise. This is a universal truth for all nations worldwide. The federal organization was created in a way that preserved the uniqueness of each member state. The founding fathers of the nation deserve praise for their foresight in forging a unified Malaysia. The leaders of the nation must not forget that if the federal constitution provisions are not upheld, the country will be reduced to nothing. Thank you.